In this series of experiments, we sought to understand what statistics are monitored by human listeners in stochastic auditory environments. The basic stimulus is a sequence of 50 millisecond tone pips selected from a pool of 20 frequencies. Here is an example. This signal is useful because it strikes a balance between richness of pattern space and simplicity as required for parametric control and modeling. To investigate what statistics the listeners are tracking, we ran an experiment where in half of the trials, the random pattern changed partway. The change was manifested as a reduction in alphabet size, and listeners were instructed to press a button as quickly as possible when hearing a change. The first question we ask is, can listeners track distributional statistics? We manipulated the distribution of the 10 retained frequencies in 5 ways. Keep the highest 10 tones, or the lowest 10 tones, the 10 middle tones, or the highest 5 and lowest 5 tones, or 10 tones randomly selected across the entire range. Even though their alphabet size all change from 20 to 10, meaning that they have similar zeroth order statistics, they are associated with different patterns of distributional statistics. Here we use a Bayesian sequential prediction model DRAX to capture listeners' performance. Through exposure to unfolding sequence, this model sequentially generates a predictive distribution of upcoming tone based on previous observations. This model has 3 perceptual parameters: memory, observation noise, and prior, which represents listeners' default assumption about the sequence distribution at the beginning of each trial. The model's prior can be a single Gaussian that is a single prior, or a multimodal Gaussian multi-prior. The model also provides 2 outputs, which are updated as the sequence unfolds: change probability and precision of the internal model. In the first experiment, we found that humans are very sensitive to this distribution of statistics, and the model successfully captures human performance. Interestingly, we found that the single prior model showed a better fit, suggesting that listeners use a single prior listening strategy in this experiment. Our next question is, can listeners use a multi-prior listening strategy? Here we created a new set of change stimuli, where the number of retained frequencies varied from 2 to 15. We hypothesized that these changes might evoke a multi-prior listening strategy, and indeed we found the multi-prior is a better fit. This suggests that human listeners can use both single and multi-priors depending on the task content. Our third question is, then what information is tracked by passive listening brain? We presented naive listeners the changes with different distributional statistics while watching silent videos. We found that the EEG responses showed an early divergence to all of these transition conditions from the no change control, demonstrating that the brain was sensitive to these changes. Comparing the EEG response with the unfolding outputs from the model, we found that the EEG response pattern is consistent with predictions from the multi-prior model rather than the single prior model. As a confirmatory step, we conducted the last EEG experiment with 2 change conditions, R20 to R5 and R20 to R10 middle. We chose them because they have similar behavioral performance, but the predictions from multi and single prior models are different. As hypothesized, the EEG data were consistent with the pattern predicted by the multi-prior model and revealed that the brain responses reflected the precision of the internal model of the sound sequence constructed during listening.